शन्नो मित्रः शं वरुणः शन्नो भवत्वर्यमा शन्न इन्द्रो बृहस्पतिः शन्नो विष्णुरुक्रमः नमो ब्रह्मणे नमस्ते वायो त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्मासि त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म वदिष्यामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्वी शान्ति शान्तिः यश्छन्दसामिषभो विश्वरूपः छन्दोभ्योऽध्यमृतात् सम्बभूव समेन्द्रो मेधया आस्पृणोतु अमृतस्य देवधारणो भूयासं शरीरं मे विचर्षणं जिह्वा मे मधुमत्तमा कर्णाभ्यां भूरिविश्रुवं ब्रह्मणः कोशोऽसि मेधया पिहितः श्रुतं मे गोपाय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः अहं वृक्षस्य रेरिवा कीर्तिः पृष्ठं गिरेरिवा ऊर्ध्वपवित्रो वाजिनीव स्वमृतमस्मि द्रविणगुंसवर्चसं सुमेधा अमृतोक्षितः इतीर्तिशङ्कोर्वेदानुवचनम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः आप्यायन्तु मम अङ्गानि वाक्प्राणश्चक्षुः श्रोत्रमथो बलमिन्द्रिया मा ब्रह्म निराकरोत् अनिराकरणमस्तु अनिराकरणं मे अस्तु तदात्मनि निरतेय उपनिषत्सु धर्मास्ते मयि सन्तु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः वाङ् मे मनसि प्रतिष्ठिता मनो मे वाचि प्रतिष्ठितम् आविराविर्मयेधि वेदस्य महानि ईस्थः श्रुतं मे मा प्रहासीः अनेनादितेन अहोरात्रान् सन्दधामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम् अवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः भद्रं नोम् अपि वातय मनः ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येम अक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः प्रवेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः यो ब्रह्माणं विदधाति पूर्वं यो वै वेदांश्च प्रहिणोति तस्मै तगुंहदेवमात्मबुद्धिप्रकाशं मुमुक्षुर्वै शरणमहं प्रपद्ये ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Narayanam Padma Bhuvam Vasishtam Shaktim Cha Tatputra Parasharam Cha Vyasam Shukam Gaudapadam Mahantam Govinda Yogindra Mathasya Shishyam Shri Shankaracharya Mathasya Padmapadam Cha Hastamalakam Cha Shishyam Tam Totakam Vartikakaramanyānasmadgurūn Santato Manatosmi. Om Vishwandarpanadishyamana Nagari Tulyam Najantargatam Pashyan Nijantargatam Pashyanatmani Mayaya Bahirivodbhutam Yatha Nidraya Yat Sakshat Kurute Prabodha Samaye Swatmanamevadvayam Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Bijasyantarivāṅkuro Jagadidam Prāṅ Nirvikalpam Punaha Maya Kalpita Desha Kala Kalana Vaichitrya Chitri Kritam Maya Viva Vijrambhayatyapi Maha Yogi Vayasvechaya Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Yasyaiva Spuranam Sadatmakam Asatkalparthakam Bhasate Sakshat Tattvamasiti Veda Vachasa Yo Bodhayatyashritan Yat Sakshat Karanat Bhavena Punaravrittir Bhavambho Nidhau Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Nana Chidragatoddarasthita Mahadipa Prabhabhaswaram Jnanam Yasya Tu Chakshuradikarana Dvara Bahispandate Janamiti Tameva Bhantamanubhatye Tatsamastam Jagat Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Deham Pranamapindriyanapi Chalam Buddhim Cha Shunyam Viduhu Stri Balanta Jadopamastvam Bhranta Bhisham Vadinaha Maya Shakti Vilasa Kalpita Mahavyamoha Samharine. Janmadhyasya Yataha. Second Sutra. Janmadi Asya Yataha. So we have already started to analyze the meaning of this sutra, and this is where it's a Lakshana Vakya. So as we saw, Lakshana Pramanabhyam Artha Siddhi, that unless you know exactly what it is and how you know it, you cannot know it. Even if it is right in front of you, you cannot know it. So like we saw the example that if the child, you say, hey, look at this beautiful moon, and suppose the child understands the language but doesn't understand what moon is, it'll have a blank expression. Same thing is true for us when we say Brahman. It is right, it is not only in front of me, it is me. But since I don't know it, no one has really given me a proper introduction to it. And also, no one has told me exactly how I will identify it. I don't get it. And so therefore I ignore it and I'm ignorant of Brahma, even though I am Brahma. So all the Mahavakyas, for example, point out that really Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, Ayam Atma Brahma, the two are the same. There's no difference between them. So in this case, before we begin the further analysis of the second sutra, one thing I thought that I'll just put this thought in your mind, and which is that we are here now going to be describing Brahman. Yato va itimani bhutani jayante, and all those kinds of things. We will see all of that. This all pertains to Brahman. And also in terms of its creative power, and which we will go into today, Brahman can also be called Ishvara. So Ishvara is with the Maya Shakti. You can say it. We saw the two different kind of Lakshana. One is Tatastha Lakshana, one is Swarupa Lakshana. So Tatastha Lakshana is one which can be identified. The crow has nothing to do with the house, but you can identify the house by saying, that's our house, the one where the crow is sitting. And so that is called Tatastha Lakshana. And then the Swarupa Lakshana is one which has nothing to do with anything else. It's its own Swarupa. So these are the two type of Lakshanas that we will see. So here Ishvara is with Tatastha Lakshana, and Brahman is Swarupa Lakshana. It's the same thing. There is no difference between them. But when it is described in terms of relativity, the creativity, the sustenance, all that is called Ishvara. And when it has nothing to do with the creation and so on, when you want to really know exactly what it is, Satyam Jnanam Anantam, then it is Swarupa Lakshana. So what I wanted to say here, and just plant that thought in your mind, and it took me a long time to really kind of get clarity on this, so I thought I would just offer that for you. This description of Brahman with the Lakshana that we'll be doing more clearly, in more detail, applies to you too. There are certain aspects of it that may not apply to you. Like, for example, Ishvara is Sarvagya, Sarvashaktiman, because he's got the whole cosmos as his creation. And you and I are not Sarvashaktiman, Sarvagya, we are Alpagya. We have very limited knowledge. Alpashaktiman, we have very limited powers. We can easily snuff out a little ant just by putting our finger on it. But if there is a tiger or a snake, then we are incapable of tackling it right away. Alpashaktiman. So there are some differences between Ishvara and Jiva as far as the Shakti and the Jnanam is concerned. But for most purposes, they are identical. And by most purposes, I mean both from the Tatastha Lakshana and Swarupa Lakshana, they are the same. They are the same. So the thought that I wanted to offer for you that you should keep as we are reviewing the Brahma Sutra is this. When we talk about the creativeness of Ishvara, we should also see that I have the same creativeness because my capability were given by Ishvara. They are not, I didn't do it on my own. It was all given to me. And the way I deal with myself is identical as Ishvara, should be identical as Ishvara deals with himself. So this is something that we will when we review the second the second sutra of the Dakshinamurti Stotram, which we just did. This will become a more detailed topic, but I just want to mention it to you there. Bijasya antarivankuro jagadidam prang nirvikalpam punaha maya kalpita desha kala kalana vaichitya chitrikritam mayavi iva vijrambayati api mahayogi iva yat svechaya tasmai Shri Gurumurtaye namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye. So here it means that this is magic. Magic. Something which is not real appears as real is magic. This is exactly how the magic is. The magician is capable from his skills and training, his and her training, that something is created in your vision when it is not there. This is magic. So exactly the same thing is true, that the entire creation is magical. And here the difference is that the magician creates the magic but is not caught up in it. Whereas the spectators of the magic or experience the same magic, but they are caught up in it. Caught up in the sense that they cannot distinguish what is real, what is unreal. So now to close off this side subject that I was taking up, our job is to mimic exactly how the magician is creating. Mimic in the sense that we'll need to understand how the magic is being created. And we need to understand how I also create the same magic, but I don't know it. This is exactly what happens in a dream. I have the same capability of creating magic, a mini magic, which of course comes from Ishvara. Ishvara is the one that has given us, each of the jiva, the power to dream and to sleep and to be awake. But if you look at the dream part of it, it was very specifically designed, as we have talked about it many, many times, to give us a very clear hint that the magic is something that I also do. And my attitude should be exactly as Ishvara's attitude is. We went over this in some detail at the Purusha Suktam class that we just finished. We discussed this at quite a length. Exactly the same thing. So anyway, to summarize, what I would say is that as we go into the details of the Lakshana and Pramana and keeping Brahman as the subject matter, because this is a Brahman Sutra, Brahma Sutra, keeping Brahman as the subject matter, we should be cognizant of the fact that the same things, most of the same things, not most, that's a wrong usage of words, most of them are the same. To me, to us. This is exactly how we should do it. So keep that in the back of your mind, that it is not something, and so that's exactly how the vidya goes, that it goes from paroksha to aparoksha. The Brahmasmi, it goes from Brahmasti to Brahmanasmi. So keep that is going there, keep that in mind as we study Brahman, how the magic is being done, all of that. Anyway, that realization took me a while. Even though our acharyas were probably saying it, not probably, they were saying it from the very beginning. But you know, things don't strike you until you're ready for it. And this is where your own thinking, we have to really power up our own thoughts so that it is very convincing to us. Otherwise, it is just look like academic knowledge. And so I'm sure that the acharyas were saying all this, but it dawned on me much later and this is the whole idea about mananam. With mananam, it strikes you, it says, wow, that's wonderful. All right, so let us proceed on the analysis of the second sutra. So, Janmadi asya yataha. And so we had talked about the asya, all the words we have done. By the way, one thing I would recommend that you do is to review the class notes before starting. Review the previous class notes, your own notes. I hope you are writing some things down. And you don't have to, because you may have a prodigious memory and you can recall everything that was said in the last class by closing your eyes. That may be possible, but for most of us that's not possible. And so scribbling notes as you go along is very useful. In fact, one of our students from India, she sent me, she has a very good habit, and she sends me her written notes after the class, and they're in great detail. And so she listens to it and she really writes the notes, and as you're writing, that actually solidifies it. And then you can also review it. A very good habit. I applaud her for doing that. So what I would recommend is that as you start a new class, you spend a few minutes reviewing your own notes from the previous class. I was thinking about it. It's kind of like, a new class is like a running bus. So you are, in fact, you should not be late for it, because the very key things are talked about at the very beginning of the class. But suppose you are a little bit late and you're trying to catch up. It's something like the bus is running and you cannot stop. But you know what you can do? You can begin to walk fast and even run a little bit, so that you become cognizant, you're very close to the bus, and then you can catch it. So you can speed up your own thinking and so on. Anyway, so just some recommendation, but I do think that reviewing your previous notes are very useful. So what we saw there was asya. So very briefly, and then no more revision after that, it's all new information. Asya means of this. So here, this is used very, very thoughtfully. It is not that. Why? Because Brahman is right, the magic of Brahma is right in front of us. So this should be used. Pratyaksha gocharasya, as we saw in the in our mantras, Shanno mitrasham varunaha, Shanno bhavat varyama, Shanna indro brihaspatihi, Shanno vishnu rurukramaha, Namo brahmane. Tvameva pratyaksham brahmasi. Tvameva pratyaksham brahma vadishyami. Pratyaksha means that you are right in front of me. And vadishyami means is future tense. That I will speak in future the truth that you are right in front of me. Right? I mean, means that this is my experience of life. Not something that I have to look for by going to a tirtha sthanam, to a pilgrimage. So it's interesting what happens in a pilgrimage, why people go to pilgrimages, is that they have difficulty in visualizing Ishvara when they are sitting in the home. But if you are going to a pilgrimage with a lot of effort, that's why it is on the top of a mountain or some inaccessible places, so some effort is required. Due to that, your mind becomes focused. And what you see is the image of Ishvara in your own mind. It becomes a little easier. But ultimately, it has to be done in your own mind, not something else. Our acharyas used to say that when you go to a pilgrimage, ultimately you close your eyes. And what really appears in front of you as your experience, that is really what Brahman is. So it's the same Brahman, but you were sitting at home. But you had difficulty visualizing it until you went to a pilgrimage. This is the contribution of going to pilgrimages or to a mandir. Same thing. So asya means right here. Not that, but right here in front. So that's the meaning of the word asya. Now let us move on, new material. Let's analyze the word yataha. So janmadi asya yataha. So we analyzed janmadi, that one which is in the form of beginning, births, and sthiti and laya. All those three are included in janma adi. Janma adi yasya. Janma is the beginning of what? A three thing. We saw all of that. I'm not going to go into that. Anyway, so now let us go to the word yataha. So yataha here is of which. Yasmat karanat. Of which. Brahman is that who is the karana, who is the cause of janma, etc. So now the question comes in, which karana is Shruti referring to? Is it referring to the intelligence behind the creation or the material behind the creation? Like for example, you can, if you make a cup, clay cup, the cause of the cup is the clay, out of which the cup is made, out of which it is sustained, out into which it disappears. So therefore, the cup is the karya and the clay is the karana. So this is upadana karanam, called the material cause. Or really speaking, the person who visualized exactly how the cup should be shaped, the intelligence behind it, it doesn't happen by itself, some intelligent person has to do it, is called the intelligent cause. So we see that in the world, there are two causes. One is nimitta karanam, as it is said in Shastra. So nimitta karana means the one who designed it, who thought of it. And the other one is the upadana karana. I'll pause here for a second because something just crossed my mind. In the year, I think it was 2006, somewhere there, there was a need to complete a high school building in Rishikesh. And Swami Dayanandji took over an older building which was running at up to 6th or 7th grade. Then he wanted to add some more classrooms and turn it into a high school, which it eventually did. We had some problems with the people who were corrupt, and they took away the money and all those kinds of things. It was a huge problem later on. But in the beginning, and then it got resolved, everything's okay now. So it all ended well. So now it's a high school called Swami Dayanand High School in Rishikesh, very close to where our ashram is, within like half a mile or so. Many of you might have gone there. So anyways, so there was a request to add some buildings, some rooms in the building. And so I decided I was started to teach Arsha Vidya for several, 5-6 years by that time. So I had a sizable number of students. If you recall, some of you might have been there. I decided that we will contribute the money. And so we did. We, I think, collected, I recall, $40,000. And many of you contributed, I contributed, and we organized it and sent it to them and so on. Then the building was built and it was inaugurated, and I had the Swami Dayanandji also came for the inauguration. And I remember Swamiji's words. That's what triggered this. He was saying, please come, Vijay Kapoorji, please come sit down here. So I sat down, and he says, I want everybody to know this is a very beautiful building and so on. Here is the Nimitta Karanam. Vijay Kapoor is the Nimitta Karanam. Nimitta Karanam here meant, I still remember that so well. He was the one who took the initiative to collect the money and get this thing built. The Upadana Karanam was all the material that was used for doing it. Anyway, that was just something that occurred to me. So here the question is, when you are analyzing yataha, which of these two does the Shastra mean? That Brahman, is it the Upadana Karanam or is it the Nimitta Karanam? So as we analyze it further, it is shown that let us understand what the difference between them is. Okay? So in Nimitta Karanam is only Shrishti Karta, is not the Sthiti Karta or Laya Karta. Only the Shrishti Karta. He began, so for example, in that building that we did, and if I am the Nimitta Karanam, I caused it to be built. I took the initiative to be built, but then I'm not responsible for running it. I don't even know whether the buildings are being well kept or not. And what is going to happen to it. So I'm only the Srishti Karta, not this Sthiti Karta or the Laya Karta. So therefore, it means, whereas an Upadana Karanam covers all three, isn't it? Because the clay is the Karana for Shrishti, for Sthiti, and for Laya, all three of them. Just 1 minute. I need to get another couple of pages that I had. So therefore, because, so let's analyze this. This is interesting to analyze. It's just as a, because it says janmadi yasya yataha. So yataha means yasmat karanat, because of which. Janmadi means all three of them. Otherwise it will say simply janma. But because it says Shrishti etc. Adi means here etc. Just like in English you say like the beginning etc. So when you say etc., that means all three of them are covered. And if all three of them are covered, that can only be done if it is an upadana karanam. Why? Because otherwise it will be only a Shrishti karanam, like a nimitta karanam. But because it is all three of them, therefore it must be upadana karanam. So that means it is really just upadana karanam. It is not a nimitta karanam. Is that is that true? So it is argued, no. Well, you are right and you are wrong in arguing that this is just an upadana karanam. You are right in saying that yes, if you covered all three, it has to be upadanam. If you only covered shrishti, it has to be nimitta karanam. But there is a difference. Because in the world, we mostly see the nimitta karanam and upadana karanam as being separate from each other. There are two things. One is the designer and the one is the material. Okay? But that applies to the limited world. In this vast, infinite world, the Srishti, it doesn't apply. It doesn't apply. Why? Because, so you should see let's see the sequence of this. Why doesn't it apply? Because the Srishti is infinite. Srishti is not finite. The whole creation is not finite. There is no end to it. It is not a very large number. It is an infinite number. This is what science has to really come to terms with. It's a mathematical aberration. A large number is not infinity. Infinity means endless, means the whole thing. Purnamidav purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate purnasya purnamadaya purnameva avashishyate. Purnam means infinity. And if the Srishti is Purnam, if the Srishti is infinite, you cannot have a difference between Nimitta Karanam and Upadana Karanam. Why not? Because if the Upadana Karanam is different from Nimitta Karanam, they both limit each other. So if the Upadana Karanam is separate from the Nimitta Karanam, then it cannot be infinity. You see, that's the reason. And by the way, we say that even though they are relatively rare, we do have the instances where the Nimitta and Upadana Karanam are one and the same. And there are two typical examples given. One is that of a spider. It's funny, just this morning my wife and I were talking about this. We have been, now our discussions between Pammi and I have been, what should we do about this home? Because we built this like 35 years ago, and it is built on a hillside, and we have 3 stories, and there's lots of stairs, and we really enjoyed it. We had a nice view and everything. But now it is time to think about the next stage of our life. Should we stay here? And despite our increasing soft tissue problems, knees not working, this, that, or the other, or should we move into a smaller place? And it's so funny, this morning, when the sun was bright, and when the sun is bright, it shows all the cobwebs very well. You didn't even think there was a cobweb. Just there was a couple of places. Last night there was no cobweb, but this morning there is a big jala right there. And so we were both laughing at this. So my wife said, if we moved into a smaller home, we wouldn't have as many cobwebs in the house. So that's another reason to move into a smaller home. So we were both laughing at it. We said, that's not enough of a reason to move. And besides, even in a smaller home, the cobwebs will be there. Just few less of them, but you still have to clean them. Spider is an example. It's a cobweb out of its own body. And the other one is the dream. So in the dream, you are both the nimitta karanam as well as the upadana karanam. It's a very important example, really. I think this is where the Mandukya Upanishad and the Karika, they're like the essence of the most advanced. We have took one series of classes in it, but we have to really keep thinking about it. The dream is the best example of the nimitta and upadana karanam being one and the same. And so there are examples. It's not as though it is unthinkable. And so, but certainly in the case of the infinite Srishti, it is very clear that the two are one and the same. So, I think we might actually start to go over the Shankara Bhashya, but here is Sanskrit shloka that epitomizes what we just went through is Dvitiyasya abhavat Brahma eva nimitta upadana karanam bhavitum arhati. Beautiful shloka. He says Dvitiyasya abhavat, because there is no duality in the whole creation. Duality is just an aspect of it. But really, when all of the duality dissolves into unity, and it is advayam, not even, there's a word which is used for ekam, for Brahman, ekam. So when you say ekam, ekam means one, isn't it? So normally when you think of one, you always think of in terms of multiple ones as well as. When you say I am just one person, means out of 6.3 billion human beings on this earth, I am just one. So this is called eka. But when you say ekam advitiyam, ekam advitiyam. Advitiyam means one alone. The whole thing is one. Ekam. So that means that there is no dvitiya. It's an infinite. There is no infinity. There is no parts to the infinity. In a large number, there are parts. Yes. When you say our GDP is so many $trillion, then half of it goes here, half of it goes to welfare, half of to education. Yes. But when you talk about infinity, there are no parts to the infinity. Half of infinity is still infinity. 1/10 of the infinity is still infinity. And so advitiyasya abhavat. If the dvitiya is not, dvitiyasya abhavat. Brahma eva nimitta karanam and upadana karanam bhavitum arhati. It only is fit for this possibility. That's what it means. So anyway, the end result of this is that in this sutra, Janmadi asya yataha, Brahman is both the nimitta karanam as well as upadana karanam. Even though under laukika, under this worldly view, the nimitta karanam is different from a upadana karanam. This is the kind of fundamental analysis that we should be just very clear about as we shape our thinking. Anyway, so that's what it is.